Natalie, and I'm an 8th grader at BMS. I did my honors project on my ancestry. It was definitely something that I've always found interesting, and I learned a lot about myself and my family through doing this project. We're going to start with the paternal side of my dad's family. The Natalie family name dates back over 1,000 years. However, my family, like my branch of the family, didn't start until 1847 with a man named Domenico Natali. He lived in San Angelo de Alive, Italy, which is a little village about 50 miles away from Naples, Italy. He was a really poor farmer and he had about 6 children, so every winter he and many other farmers of their day sailed down to Central America to farm and then went back to their own land to farm for the rest of the year. It was a very difficult life, but they all did their best. In 1902, on the SS Gallia, Domenico and one of his sons came over to America. They worked in cotton mills and other brickyards for about 5 years before they could bring the rest of their family over. Then when the rest of their family got there, they all worked to save up money to buy a house in Rhode Island. Domenico and his wife Giovanna married their son Carlo off to a woman named Maria. They had an arranged marriage, but they were very happy and had 5 children together. One of their children was my grandpa, or my great-grandpa, Dominic. He later changed his name to Donald to Americanize his name because he was living in a difficult time and it was just so much easier to have an American name, or like an English name rather than an Italian name. So he became Donald. He met my Nana, Eunice, while he was in high school. They had a very cliche love story, but it's very touching. He met her while he was working, and the rest was history. They had 2 children together, my grandpa, David, and their other son, Donald. After, in June of 1980, their son David married a woman named Kathy, who was my grandma. And then in 1986, they had my dad, Sean, and 23 years after that, he met my mother and I. Although I was adopted into the Natali family by my dad, I still do consider myself Italian because I've never really been given any other reason not to. There are actually a few pictures here of my family. Over here is the women, the Natali women, the Natali men, and over here is my immediate family on Easter of 2014, and then my dad in uniform and his Navy uniform. Then the place that Domenico came from, San Angelo de Alive, now has a population of 2,200 people. So it has always been a very, very small village. We're going to move on to my mother's paternal side, the Crass family. The first records, like the first formal records of immigration, were with a man named Wilhelm Crass, who came over from Essen, Germany, with his wife and his young son. His son William married a woman named he married a woman named Mary Elizabeth Barr, and sometime in the 1800s, there are no formal records of when they got married, because it wasn't something that was documented very often in that time. They had a son together named Fred Sr., who then married a woman named Isa Anders sometime in the 1930s, and together they had 2 sons, Fred Jr. and Harold B., who are my great-grandpas. Fred Jr. married a woman named, after that, he married a woman named Dorothy Jean Odell, and together they had 3 children, one of whom is my grandpa, and the other 2 are my great-aunts. The children are Michael, or Grandpa Mike, Aunt Paula, and Aunt Barbara, or as we all call her, Aunt Barbie. And my grandpa Mike married a woman named Barbara. Very strange because there's so many Barbaras. He met Barbara while he was attending Truman State University, and then he later married her and had 2 children with her, my mother Mandy and my uncle Caleb, or we all like to call him Uncle Boo. It's a little inside joke we've had for a while. My mother was born on May 21st, 1979, and right before they found out that my grandma was pregnant with her, they were listening to a song called Mandy by Barry Manilow. And as soon as they found out that she was pregnant, they decided to name the baby Mandy. My mom had my older sister, Alyssa, in 1997, so that was kind of a little shock because she was pretty young, but she was really happy. Like, they were all really happy. Very happy family. They all made their home in Gary, Nebraska, where my grandpa and my grandma ran the Sears store for about 10 years. Unfortunately, my grandpa Mike died in October of 2019. He's greatly missed, but he's also very greatly celebrated. And here are some pictures. This is Fred Jr. and Dorothy Jean on their anniversary in 1999. The summer of 1941 this picture is just basically Dorothy Jean, her siblings, and her grandma Tracy. They all look very serious, so this took a while. This is a more modern picture, the summer of 2018. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that anymore, but that happens. And then sometime in the early 1930s, we don't really know when this picture was taken, but it was basically Fred Sr., Isa, and Isa's parents and siblings. My last and final family is the Lopez family. David Lopez is my biological father, and I don't know much about him because he's an absentee parent, and his family doesn't really want communication with both me and my paternal younger brother. What I do know, though, is that David Lopez was born in Hammond, Indiana, to Barbara Moreno and Fernando Lopez. They are all of purely Mexican descent, so I'm left to believe that they're like many other Hispanic people today. One of their ancestors came over from Spain and most likely had a child with an indigenous woman. And from there, the line just kept going. So I'm probably very distantly indigenous. I've never really experienced the Mexican culture. I've never grown up in it. So I don't know too much about it, or just the customs and the language and stuff. I don't really know. I'd be interested to experience that culture, but reality kind of sets in with that. Here is us in Germany, which is where Wilhelm and Gertrude, his wife, were from. Over here is San Angelo de Alli, right next to Naples. It directly translates to Holy Angel of Light, which I think is really cool because many Italian places were named after something religious because it's a very important part of their country. So I thought that was really cool. Although I've only mentioned about 3 nationalities, I am from Holland, France, and Ireland. We aren't sure where, but I'm kind of from all over the world. I thought that was pretty cool.
I'm in the 7th grade, and today I'm going to be doing the Tootsie Pop experiment. This is an experiment I've been wanting to do, I believe, since the 3rd grade because it's an age-old question we've all been wondering since even kindergarten for some people. And today, my overall goal for this was to find out how many licks it takes to get to center, but the least amount possible. And by using this, I did a couple experiments to where I would soak the Tootsie Pop in certain liquids or solutions to find out how they affected it. One of the first ones I did was at room temperature. I just soaked it in regular old water. This was kind of my control, I guess, because if you actually use your tongue and do it how most people would do it, you can't really get the exact variables and stuff. So putting certain variables into play, I went with water because it was the closest to the pH level and just the overall balance of stuff in the mouth. And so for all my other variables, I went for cold water, hot water, and then lemon juice to kind of bring up the pH level a bit and see how a higher pH level would affect it. So with the room temperature water, the weight of the Tootsie Pop started at 14 grams, and letting it soak in there for about 20 minutes, I took it out and weighed it. It was about 7 grams after that, and this is what the Tootsie Pop looked like after I had taken it out. The cold water one was about 14 grams when I started. When I took it out after about 20 minutes, it weighed only 10 grams, and that's how it looked when I took it out. For the lemon juice, it started at about 14 grams as well, and leaving that in there for 20 minutes, when I took it out, it was about 11 grams. For the hot water, it started about 14 grams, left it in there for 20 minutes, and ended at about 4 grams. So for this one, I was able to conclude that hot water would be the most useful heat in general because it's ended up with the least amount of grams left. And I find it quite surprising that lemon juice had the most, because you would think that with a higher pH level it would dissolve faster, which oddly it didn't. So I took a couple more control tests on just using me, myself, and my brother. We all used one Tootsie Pop each, and we concluded that the general amount is in between 147 and about 253 licks per usual person. And with that, we combined this and hot water, since we figured that would be the most useful. We decided that we could use anything that would allow us to heat up or use heat in the main process of trying it again. So by using this, what I chose to do is I sat in a hot room with a bunch of steam, and this I was able to get 98 licks out of the thing, which is way smaller than my original amount, which is 174. And for my brother, he kept drinking glasses of hot water or tea while he was doing it, and he ended up with just about 100. And with this, I was able to conclude that hot water is definitely one of the most valuable things when you're trying to do this. And if you ever want to try it at home, do it in a hot room.
I'm Justin from the Bluffs Middle School. I'm a 6th grader. My art project was ancient Egypt. For ancient Egypt, it's kind of weird because there's the Sphinx, you have the goddesses, and the pyramids, and the flag too. But for the pyramids of Giza, actual name, the pyramids are actually located outside of Egypt. And it was kind of weird because how could they get across from the Nile River? And that's still a mystery to this day, I guess. For the Sphinx, it took about 3 years to build the Sphinx. And I think it was outside the pyramids, out of Egypt, not the pyramids, too. But going on next, the Egyptians were monotheists. I think how you say that. So they believe in many gods. I did most of them. My favorite one is Mud. I think that's how pronounce the goddess's name. If you're a mother of children, that's the goddess of the mothers, mostly of the goddesses. And we have Thor. He is the goddess of wisdom and knowledge. And now today with pyramids, there's actually a museum filled with thousands of ancient objects. And if you're wondering about the wars, how they got on the chariots, actually Egyptian men and women could fight. And they had to wear makeup. Still don't know why. And for the Sphinx, for his nose, is a really complimentary for most children. A guy named the guy that actually chipped off the Sphinx's nose was Salah al-Damaro in 1378 BC, so a long time ago before any of us were born. And the Sphinx is actually 240 feet tall. And the Book of the Dead. It's not actually a book. Hollywood actually, quote unquote, did that, a book. And it was actually hieroglyphics. They were written in the royal sayings to give riches to the poor. And this will help the mummies in the afterlife. And some versions were 100 feet long. Here's some more facts about Egypt. Moses was actually born there. And Ramses II. Moses was found by the Pharaoh's daughter.
What is a tornado? A tornado is a violent, continuous column of air touching the ground, usually attached to the base of a thunderstorm. Tornadoes are nature's most violent storms. Spawned from powerful thunderstorms, tornadoes can cause fluctuations on neighborhoods and cities. Winds of a tornado can reach 300 miles per hour. Damage has inches of 1 mile wide and 50 miles long. Strong downbursts, straight lines, winds may also occur due to the same thunderstorm. Hail is very common found in black, very close to the tornado's eyes. As the strongest thunderstorms that spawn tornadoes run under the aftermarket conditions that are also likely to make hail. Every state is some risk to this hazard. Some tornadoes are clearly visible while rain or nearby low-hanging clouds occur. Other tornadoes develop extremely rapidly, and they display just a quickly. Most tornadoes are on the ground for less than 15 minutes. Before tornadoes, the wind might die down and the air becomes still. The cloud debris can mark the location of the tornado, even if funnel is not visible. Tornadoes generally occur when the trail trailing edge of a thunderstorm. It is not uncommon to see clear sunlit streaks behind the tornado producing paragraphs are edited from rats just as well. You probably also wondering how do tornadoes form? Well, exactly how tornadoes form is not completely understood. What is known as the motion result from supercell thunderstorms. These severe thunderstorms have processes of updrafts that can reach speeds of 100 miles per hour within the storm. A strong vertical wind shear causes a horizontally rotating cylinder of it. The updraft lifts the rotating cylinder within the supercell. The rotating cylinder of becoming stretched and spins faster and faster, forming a tornado. The rotation within the thunderstorm gives the supercell its cosmic appearance, which can be seen on the more information. How do you find tornadoes? How do you find tornadoes or storms? There is the info. Here's the info. The National Weather Service and storm chasers use a radar, and so it's always a radar. This reflected signal is received by the radar during its listening period. Computers analyze the strength of the returned pulse time it took to travel to the object and back. Or Doppler shift the pulse. This process of omitting a signal. Listening for any return signal, the next signal takes place very fast. Next part spends the vast amount of time listening for returning signals. It's sent when the time of all pulses each hour are translated. The time of the radar is actually transported. The radar is on for about 7 seconds each hour. The remaining 59 minutes and 53 seconds are spent listening for returning signals. Okay. My life on this one, but it's kind of that's what I thought. What do I do if there's a tornado coming? One option is don't go outside be a chicken, which means don't mess around. Don't be an idiot. Be in a safe shelter that's underground. Don't go in a current chase unless if you're a storm chaser. And if you're on the highway, go over and get in and you're done sitting. Okay, now let's look at what is tornado. In the United States, there are two regions that, with a geography high frequency of tornadoes. Florida is one tornado alley in the south central United States is the other. Florida has a enormous tornado supply due to its high frequency and almost daily thunderstorms. In addition, several tropical storms or hurricanes often impact Florida each year. When these tropical systems move up the shore of the enabled convection storms in the rain bands often produce tornadoes. However, despite the violent nature of tropical storm or hurricane, the tornadoes they spawn, which is some as water spouts, tend to be weaker than those produced on the tropical thunderstorms. Here's some images. Okay. What is the EF scale? The Futura scale, or the F scale, was originally developed by Dr. touched you. Therefore, the future to estimate tornado wind speeds based on the damage left behind a tornado and as further EF scale developed by the Forum of the nationally renowned meteorologists and wind engineers make improvements to the original F scale. This EF scale has replaced the F scale, which has been used to assign tornado ratings since 1979. The original F scale had eliminations such as lack of damage, factors, no account for construction quality and visibility, and no defense correlation between damage and wind speed. These eliminations may have led to some tornadoes being rated and the construction of and some cause overrate of tornado wind speeds. The EF scale takes into account more variables than the original F scale. Did one of the assigning a wind speed rating to the tornado, the EF reports strength, damage, and collision, or DIS, such as building type, structures, and trees for damage and crater. There are 8 degrees of damage DOE rating from the beginning of a physical damage to complete construction of the damage and square. The original F scale did not take the details into account. For example, the EF scale and EF3 tornado would estimate wind speeds of between 136 and 165 miles per hour up to 218 or which would be kilometers, 218 and 266 kilometers. Whereas the original F scale and EF3 tornado estimate the wind speeds necessary to cause the EF3 damage. After damage are not high as one that may lead to over-restoration of the tornado wind speeds.
Grade at BMS. My honors project is on the Civil War. What was the Civil War? The Civil War was one of the deadliest wars in American history. What do you already know about the Civil War? The Civil War was mainly about slavery. In this war, most people died of disease. There were around 6,020 deaths in the Civil War. There were about 6,818 casualties. The war started on April 12, 1861, and ended on May 9, 1865. What was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War? One of the bloodiest battles was the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg lasted 3 days and nights. The second day of battle was the bloodiest of all 3 days. The Battle of Gettysburg killed at least 1,000 men. What was the Emancipation Proclamation? The Emancipation Proclamation was put into place on January 1st, 1863. It was signed by Abraham Lincoln as a way to end the war and to end the Confederacy, and was applied to the southern states. The Emancipation Proclamation states that all persons held as slaves within any states as designated part of the state shall be in rebellion against the United States shall be thenceforward forever free. That's what set all slaves free. How did the Civil War end? The Civil War ended in spring 1865 when Robert Lee surrendered the last Confederate major to Ulysses S. Grant. And the last battle was at Palmetto Ranch, Texas, on May 16, 1865. Who was at war? The Civil War between the Confederate and the Union. The Civil War was about slavery. Most people died of disease. There were about 62,000 deaths and 6,822 casualties. The war started on April 12, 1861 and ended on May 9, 1865. One of the bloodiest battles was Gettysburg. The Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Abraham Lincoln and was won in the war. The Emancipation Proclamation was put into place on January 3, 1863. How did the Civil War end? The war ended on spring 1865 when Robert Lee surrendered the last Confederate major to Ulysses S. Grant. These are both those people. Where is the last battle fought? The last battle was fought at Palmetto Ranch on 1865. May 6, 1865. Thank you for watching.
My name is Carmen Turnage, and I am in 6th grade at Bluffs Middle School. So I did my honors project, and I did it about how the Egyptians buried their dead. So we'll move on. So this picture right here is a picture of what like a really fancy tomb would look like. Before it was like old and rotten, it got stolen. And so a long time ago, the Egyptians, depending on how rich or poor you were, they buried the dead in a very specific way, because they thought that you had to preserve a body in like a few specific ways, otherwise it wouldn't make it to the afterlife, and like be stuck in its grave, cold, sad and empty. So yeah, some got the full process, like the first family, because they could afford it. But like some couldn't afford it, so they did get the whole thing. This is a picture of how like the poor would bury the dead. Like this is a baby, they would bury the baby through sand and jars. It was sad. So yeah. And the sand actually preserved the bodies really well, surprisingly. So, they thought it could only make it to the afterlife, and they preserved it so that the car, also known as the soul, could recognize that person and know who it was. So, this is like a farming table. Sorry to get back to. So the way that they would actually preserve the body is to put a hook through their nose, and they would hit it so that way the skull shattered, and then they would like suck the brain out through using the hook. I think it would be very disturbing to see that. So the reason they took the brain out is because they thought they only left the heart in, because they thought that the heart had all the knowledge and information that I needed to get to the afterlife. So afterwards they're like kind of like right here, make it kind of like right here, and they move like internal organs such as the intestines, the liver, lungs, intestines, intestines, stomach, and liver. They placed them in little big jars, which look like this. So yeah, and they would let them dry and then place them inside the jars. And they also took the heart out, but afterwards they would put it back in because they didn't want to damage it during the process. So yeah, and then they would rinse the body with like wine and spices, like bathe them in like wine and cinnamon. So yeah, and then they would cover the body with nitron, which is a type of salt, and then they would leave that alone for like about a little more than a month or two. So yeah, and then they would stuff the body with linen or sand, depending on which one you could afford better. Because if they do that to give the body a more human shape, so it'd be easier for the crowd to recognize it. And yeah, and then they would cover it with bandages, and throughout the covering, they would put jewels and amulets in the bandages, which is why Romans took the bodies, because they knew that there were jewels inside the mummy. So yeah. So the jars that they used were the first jar they used this jar right here. This jar. This jar. It's called Imseti, and it had the head of a person, and it was where the liver was stored. The second one was Quebhesna. That's the best way I can pronounce it. It's I'm pretty sure this one. It had the head of a falcon, and it had inside it was the intestines. Third was happy without -1p. Had the head of a baboon, so it's a monkey, and it protected the blunt. And the last jar is called Bromtef. It's so hard to pronounce. It had the head of a jackal, and it protected the stomach. And they were four sons of an ancient Egyptian god Horus. Horus was the basically Zeus. He was the god of the sky, and he also was thought to protect the pharaoh. And he was thought to have the Egyptians thought he was like full falcon or falcon with a man's head. So those are the jars. We're almost done. After they finished burying the body, they would have a funeral procession to the tomb. And then how it would be is there would be cattle in front, and then it would be pulling the body along. And behind that was family friends mourning over the death of whoever died. And then for some reason a priest would be pouring milk right next to the body. I don't know why. And then when they reached the tomb, the priest put on this little like head thing, and it looked like the god Anubis, which was god of the underworld. And then they would do a ceremony called opening of the mouth ceremony, where they would like place enchantment spells that would help the body in the afterlife. And then they would the mourners would give gifts to put in the tomb, and they would put the body inside the tomb. So yeah. And then some of the amulets that they put with the body in the tomb is, number one, they would put amulets wrapped up with the mummy. They did put them there they put them there because they thought it would help protect the body from any bad things in the afterlife. And then one amulet, very special amulet, this one right here, is called the Eye of Horus. It was thought to protect them from evil more than the others. And then they had these little men
mummies right here were called snaptus, and they are believed to be like servants that serve the body after death. So basically, you put to grave with your little servants. So yeah. And then they would also put in a type of jewelry and treasure inside. So, yeah. Like, some things were made out of gold. And, like, one of the only reasons we know this is because of King Tutankhamun's tomb. Because it was the only tomb that wasn't robbed. So, he's the only reason we knew that the tombs had all this stuff. So yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Hi, I'm Shara. I'm a sixth grader at BMS, and this is my honors project. It's about ancient Egypt. So to start off, the pyramids. The pyramids were pretty important to the Egyptians because they would bury the pharaohs in the pyramids so that they would have like a special tomb. They would have a gold tip on them, and they would have chambers filled with treasure, and then there'd be the tomb for the pharaoh, and then they stopped building the pyramids around 2325 BC because tomb robbers would always go, they would chisel away through, not the original exit of the tunnel, but like they would make a separate tunnel, and they would get into the tomb and they would grab all of the treasure, and the pharaohs would usually have like, they would have amulets and stuff in them, and so in their bandages, and so the robbers would usually come and take the mummy and actually take him out of the tomb and take all the amulets and stuff, and would usually just like burn the body or something, and then they would usually light it on fire and then come and collect the gold after. So so they stopped building them because they would always get robbed, and they would always take the gold tip of the pyramid off too. That's why there isn't a gold tip on any of the pyramids no more, because they would take it. And on the walls of the pyramids would be the Book of the Dead. It isn't an actual book. Hollywood just decided to make it into a book, but it would actually be hieroglyphics and pictures painted on the walls of the tunnels and chambers and in the tomb. The slaves and the farmers would usually make the pyramids. Every time that they had a new pharaoh, they would start building the pyramid so that when he died, he would have his final resting place in there. The pyramids were usually covered in limestone, and it would actually be a really, really white limestone, and it looked good because it matched the gold tip at the top, and I don't know, I guess it just kind of made it look nicer. Some of them had like when the priest would take the pharaoh into the tomb, they would usually put like a curse on the tomb so that whoever took the treasures and the money would have a curse on them until they died, and then it would probably be passed down generations. So mummies, they would usually be like preserved, so that the ka, which would be their saying for the soul, could recognize the body and return to it after the day was done. And they would wrap the mummies with amulets, like there would be a headrest, and then there would be all these different amulets. There was usually around, I don't know, like 1,300 amulets, somewhere in there, wrapped in between the bandages, and that's why the rubbers would take them, because it would usually be like emerald or something like that, and it'd be very, very, what's the word, expensive, I guess you could use that word. The pharaohs would usually get mummified because it was so expensive. So, I mean, I watched a documentary and it said that some priests were mummified because of their job and because they had the money to do it, whereas the slaves and the farmers and the people that didn't have a lot of money, they would usually just get buried in the sand. They wouldn't have a proper funeral. Some of the most famous pharaohs were King Tut, Ramesses, and Queen Ramesses the Great is what they usually called him, because he was the best pharaoh they'd ever had. And Queen Hatshepsut. First step of mummification is to insert a hook in the nose and pull out the brain. They would usually put it in there and there'd be a piece of bone right here. So they would have to break that bone with the hook, and then they would jab the hook in there a couple of times to break up the brain, and then they would pull it out piece by piece with the hook. And they did that because they thought that all the knowledge was stored in the heart and not in the brain, so the brain wouldn't really be useful in the afterlife. And it held most of the liquid, so it would make the body rot faster. So they took out the brain and they just threw that away. They wouldn't put it in canopic jars. Step 2. Then they would fill the empty spot where the brain was with leaves and salt. They did that to drain out any excess liquid like blood and, I don't know, brain juice. Step 3. Then they would make a hole right here with a volcanic rock type knife. And they would cut that open, pull out the organs. They would pull out all of the organs, like the intestines, the liver, the lung, the heart, and the stomach. They would pull out the heart, but they would wrap it so that it wouldn't rot, and they would stick it back in it. And then they would put the lungs, the liver, the kidney, and the stomach in canopic jars, and there was a certain one for each, but I couldn't find out what. So they would put them in canopic jars, and I couldn't find which ones. So I don't have that on here. But step 4, then they'd rinse the body with wine and spices. and then they'd cover the body with salt for 70 days, and they would do that to like drain out the blood and stuff like that so that it wouldn't rot, and it would preserve the body. After that, after the 70 days, they would take off all the salt and just let it sit there. After 40 days, they stuffed the body with linen or sand to give it a more human shape. And it all depended on how much money you had. If you had a lot of money, it would usually be done with linen, but if you didn't have very much money, you would probably most likely be stuffed with sand. Okay, after 70 days of letting it sit there, they would wrap the body from head to toe in bandages. And like I said earlier, in between those bandages would be amulets to help them in the afterlife. Step 7, they would place it in a sarcophagus, type of box like a coffin. The sarcophagus took the shape of the human. Like, it wouldn't just be a wooden box. It'd be like, it would have like jewels and stuff on the outside, depending on how much money. And then, if the person had been a pharaoh, he would be placed inside a special burial chamber with lots of treasure. So they would be placed into a pyramid or any other kind of tomb. When the mummies are wrapped, they usually have amulets between the bandages to help them in the afterlife. And then Shabati dolls, also known as Shabati and Ushabti, were funerary figures who, in ancient Egypt, who accompanied the deceased to the afterlife. So, depending on how many Shabati dolls you had, and they were like little things, and they would be put in a box, and it would be buried with the pharaoh. And depending on how many Shabati dolls you had would mean how much comfort you would have in the afterlife, because those would be like your little servants. So I have a couple, so the Nile River was used by ancient Egyptians for the use of water to like bathe and drink and just stuff uses for water. And there was no faucets back then, so they would have to walk to the river, grab bucket loads of water, and then go back to their house or whatever they lived in. They loved it. The farmers loved when the Nile River would flood because it gave them the rich silt from the river, and that would help them grow things. And it was scorching in Egypt, so when the Nile would flood, the water would help the plant growth and keep the animals alive. And it's weird. Usually you hate it when rivers flood because then it floods the town. But they loved it because it would cover the farming land in a rich silt so that it would help the plant growth. And it would flood it, and the water would help the plants grow, and it would help the animals live because it's scorching in the desert. The Nile made trading very hard because of all the cataracts, and cataracts are like
I don't know what they call it now, but it's like when rocks are very close to the top of the water, so it would like crash boats and stuff, and that made trading very hard because there was two separate kingdoms, the upper kingdom and the lower kingdom, and so when they tried to get to each of them, they couldn't because of all the cataracts. The Nile gave them tons of water for baths, drinking water, and to help water plants. Cataracts in the Nile to the south protected the Egyptians from the lands below them. So like the river also made invaders. It made it hard to invade Egypt because first off, the Nile's so big they can see the boats coming, and the cataracts would bring them towards. It made it hard to invade Egypt, and so I have a couple pictures of the Nile and the pyramids. This one has all of the pyramids in Giza in one shot, and then I have some things I didn't mention, like there's the Sphinx, and then there's temples, and then there's pharaohs and pyramids and mummies, and then a river. And then over here, this is the pyramids during the Nile flood. So when the Nile would flood, this is what the pyramids would look like. I hope you liked it.
Hello, I'm Allison Bear. I'm 13 and I'm in 7th grade. I did a science honors project on the effectiveness of masks, and the reason I did it was because I wanted to determine the most effective mask because I caught COVID, and so I wanted to see how actually effective masks were. I thought, my hypothesis that if I sing and yell onto an agar dish, which is these, that with a paper mask on, it will grow the least amount of bacteria, which means it'll be the most effective. I also hypothesized that the gator mask will grow the most bacteria, which means it's the least effective. I was kind of wrong. So I did 3 different types of masks: a cloth mask, a gator, and a paper. And the cloth mask was actually the most effective, and it had the least amount of bacteria. That's after 1 week, and this is after 2. The gator mask grew the second least amount, and this 1 week, 2. The paper mask grew the most amount of bacteria with a mask on. There's 1 and 2. And then there's the no mask for comparison. So to grow the bacteria, you had to wear a mask, and I put it in front of my face like this, and then I talked and sang into it. Then you put it in an incubator, as that's my incubator, and there's them inside the incubator at 33 degrees Celsius. And so in conclusion, if I sing and yell onto an agar petri dish with a paper mask on, it will grow the most bacteria, while meaning it is the least effective. If you want the most protection, wear cloth.